Okay, now we're recording. So we today we're going to learn about Musaf Shabbat, and today's going to be. We're going to delve into the text itself. We're using the ArtScroll Siddur today, but we're going to talk also about a couple of concepts, and something that we usually don't do is, which I think is important in this particular case, is also talk about what happens in other denominations. Okay, because it's very different. So let's talk about it for a second. I think this is going to be like a tiny recap from last week. Musaf, from the word nosaf, additional. That means there's an additional korban, additional offering on certain days. The Torah calls it a korban musaf. We have on Shabbat, we have on holidays, we have on Rosh Chodesh, we have on Chol HaMoed. On those days, on which, in addition to the morning and the afternoon offerings, the Tamid Shel Shachar and Tamid Shel Arbaim, on those days on which we had additional korban, additional offering, we have a Musaf service. So if there's a holiday and we're not sure whether there's Act 2 by the Chazan or not, it depends if there was a second korban or not. So, for example, Pesach, yes, there was a specific korban musaf. Therefore, we have a tefillat musaf. Shabbat, yes. Rosh Chodesh, yes. What about Hanukkah? No, of course not. Exactly, because the Torah didn't talk about Hanukkah. Hanukkah was created afterwards. Okay, Shavuot, yes. Purim, no. Yom Ha'atzmaut, no. Okay, so we get it. Okay, fine, good. What?
Keep us in the class.
I keep you in the class. Yeah, you passed. You passed the test. Okay, good. So now on those days, the Torah talks about the korban, and it really changes, right? The Torah and what we call in Parashat Pinchas, towards the end of the parasha, we call it the Parashat HaKorbanot. There is the listing of all the different korbanot. So on Shabbat, it's two lambs and blah, 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 blah. On Rosh Chodesh, this. On Pesach, this. On Shavuot, this. On Sukkot, every day is different. Okay, you do this. Okay, this is why am I saying that? Who cares? What animals and what kind of like all that stuff? Because the Mishnah already talks about the fact that the heart of every Musaf service is the recitation of the verses that specify the korban itself. So in each Amidah of Musaf, we're going to see the specific korban. Okay, now what else? If you remember, a long time ago, we discussed the whole idea of tefillah, that it parallels to the korban, right? The morning, the shacharit, whatever, fine. But on top of that, there's like other elements, like the Shema, for example, which is an independent mitzvah that, if you remember, the rabbis juxtapose it to the service, to the Amidah or whatever. So, you already come to shul, you do the whole thing. You daven, okay, even if you don't come to shul, even if you daven on your own, it's kind of a package deal. We take care of that. Another element is Torah study. Okay, it's already like a package deal. So you daven shachrit, so you have the Torah study, you have the Amidah, which is the heart of the tefillah, parallel to the korban. You have the Shema, you covered the whole thing. Check, 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 check all the boxes. Right, okay, fine. So that works for Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. We have that they have other elements, like the Shema, like Torah study. What about the Musaf? Is there anything else? No. And therefore, when we talk about Musaf, it's basically the Amidah. So last week we dealt with the communal prayer. So we, in our terminology, we call it Musaf. So when I go up and I start Yakum Pu'ukan and I do all the communal prayers, yes, it's already technically, we call it Musaf, but it's not. Musaf technically happens after the rabbi's speech. The Amidah is the, you don't have to have a speech, by the way, that's not the halacha. That's not required. But the of course not. It started hundreds of years before him. First of all, you wanted to create some sort of a separation between the services, between the Shacharit and the Musaf. Number two, it's that time where most people are already there. People were, even back then, were late to shul. We wouldn't know anything about that, but apparently it used to be something in the past. People came to shul late. I don't know, never heard of it. Anyway, a third reason, what? Men too. Apparently also men. Some men come to shul late also. Amazing, huh? Never heard of it. A third reason, it's because that is the time, it's immediately after all the communal prayers. So we're dealing with the community. So it fits also thematically. By the way, up until, I would say probably like 100, 150 years ago, rabbis did not speak every week. Rabbis gave Shabbat HaGadol, Drasha, Shabbos before Pesach, and Shabbat Shuvah. That's it. By the way, that's the way I grew up. Yeah. That's the way I grew up. In Israel, the rabbi spoke twice a year. That's it. And that was the custom for here in America, and later on in Israel, of course, but actually it's not only in America, it started also in Germany. Synagogues, congregations felt that people need more to get them to shul. It's not enough. The tefillah is not enough. They want inspiration. They want to hear from the rabbi. They want us, we're paying your salary. We want something in exchange. So this is why it started. It started in Europe, and then it really was established here in America, and from there, in Israel, some place But this idea of giving a sermon every week, it's a very modern thing. It's a very, very modern thing. Anyway, we're digressing. So Musaf technically starts or is the Amidah of Musaf, where the heart of that Amidah is going to be the recitation of the psukim that talks about the offering of the day, that specific offering, additional offering of the day. Okay? Good. Now, if that's the case, that explains why we have a tremendous difference between the Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox services when it comes to Musaf. Why? Reform synagogues or Reform Sidurim do not have a Musaf service, period. There is no such a thing. Okay, I can show you a lot of Reform Sidurim that I have in my office. None of them has a Musaf service. Think about it. I'm not saying yes or I'm not saying right or wrong, but the Reform movement said we are completely against the whole concept of offerings. It's something that is of the past, and here it's the important sentence, irrelevant to us. It's irrelevant to our practice and our religion today. You want to tell me that Shacharit is parallel after, okay, fine. It's a metaphor. That's fine. That's fine. But if the whole purpose is, and since you're not bringing this offering, we're not davening, we're not hoping, we're not asking for the rebuild of the Beit HaMikdash, we're not asking for the renewal of the sacrificial service. Okay, that's in the core of the Reform movement. Then there's no reason to have a Musaf service. Okay, and that's not me, that's in the records. By the way, one of the guys, tremendous scholar, his name was Yaakov Pituchowski. He was a scholar, and in the 50s, I want to say 50s, 60s, maybe, I don't know, some around that time, he wrote a book where he basically tried to explain the hashkafa, the whole philosophy of the Reform movement, and the reasons why of the tefillah, the Reform tefillah. Okay, so a lot of the decisions were made by what we call classic Reform. That was like, you know, people like Wise and Meyerbeer and all those guys that today are synagogues, but back then there were people that, you know, made decisions. And those decisions had practical implementation in terms of the service and what tefillot we're going to change and how we're going to change them and if we're going to change them and what we're going to cut out and why and all that kind of stuff. And he wrote this book explaining the rationale of the tefillot. I read that book. And that's kind of the nucleus of this idea of Tfilat Musaf. Tfilat Musaf, the whole thing is the Korban Musaf. We're not dealing with Korbanot. It's not part of our core belief. And therefore, there's no reason to have Tfilat Musaf. And this is why there's no Musaf service in the Reform movement all year. Shabbat, Pesach, Shavuot, doesn't matter. There is no Musaf service. There's Tfilah. The Tfilah has all those components of Shacharit or whatever, Torah, whatever that is. And in their style, in their whatever adjustments. What? Some of them. It's significantly shorter. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, like, you know, in the way they do that, whatever, but there is no Musaf. Musaf is something that does not exist. It's optional because the whole practical of halakha is something that is part of the philosophy, which is it's an optional. Kosher is optional.
They don't recognize that it's
No. But okay, maybe we'd like, you know, one day we can have like a whole class about Reform philosophy, but that's not today. Moving on. So there's nothing to discuss about the Musaf, the Reform Musaf, because there is no such a thing. This is the Lev Shalem, which is the standard conservative Siddur. And here, if you look at the Musaf service, you'll see something that is interesting. So the Musaf, the conservative movement, obviously see itself committed to halakha, etc. They have their interpretation of things and they do things in a different way. We're not going to get into that. But the Siddur itself is very similar to the traditional Siddur. It's very, very similar. In the last, I would say 20, 30 years, there are more changes. For example, adding the matriarchs, becoming gender sensitive, you know, all okay, but that's kind of like more of a new stuff. The idea of what do we do with the Musaf service has to do with their approach towards Korbanot altogether. So they're not as radical as the Reform, but on the same time, they're not davening for the rebuild of Beit HaMikdash in that sense that it's going to be a renewal of the sacrificial service. So if that's the case, what do you do with the Musaf? If the Musaf itself, the core of the Musaf is the Korban, what do you do with that? So here, I want to show you what they did. take your article to do. I know I'm going to start from the beginning, but just like I want to kind of on the surface. Yeah. Look at page 466. We are in the 5th line. Yeah, in the middle of Tikanta, the 5th line, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line. Yehi Ratzon. Okay, find it in the English. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line in the English. May. See that? Yes? Okay. Here is where we're going to talk about that. We're going to delve into the text in a second. But here's where we kind of are switching from the past into the future. Okay, the bracha starts with the past tense. You establish Shabbat, all that kind of stuff. And you commanded us to bring this Korban Musaf, right? You know what? Why don't we just go from the beginning? Any volunteers who wants to read that English? You established the Shabbat, found favor in its offering. No? Anyone? 467. Yes, okay, Terry, let's go. 67, 467, 467, 467. Yeah, you established. Okay, so far it's God, you told us ABC. That's the stuff that happened in the past. That's what you told us to do. Fine. Next.
Those who savor will never light, and also those who love the speech that befits it have chosen grace.
Okay, so this is kind of the benefits. That's what happens. You gave us rules, and if we follow the rules, that's the outcome. Okay, it's expansion of that. We're still in the past or present, let's call it, because that obligates us. Fine.
They were instructed about it. You commanded us, Hashem our God, to offer on it the Sabbath Musaf offering properly.
Okay, back to the past. Sinai, temple, obviously Shabbat. But I'm saying Shabbat of Sinai, Shabbat of the temple, Shabbat of Sinai. That's the laws of Shabbat. Shabbat of the temple. That means the offering of the Musaf, offering. Fine. Then it switches.
If you bring us up in gladness to our land, and plant us within our boundaries.
Okay, so now I'm asking God something. And we said, remember, we don't have on Shabbat, we don't have petitions, personal petitions. However, communal ones, we do.
There, we will perform before you our required offerings, the continual offerings in their order, and the Musaf offerings according to these laws.
Okay, so what is it that we're asking? God, bring us back to Yerushalayim, build the Beit HaMikdash so we can once again bring those korbanot as you commanded us. That's fine. We don't, yeah. That's now it's going to be specification of that. Okay. Listen to the to what they did in the conservative one. So it starts the same thing, and then when it switches to the future, to the tefillah, to the request, they say, Yehi ratzon lefanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'lo avotenu. Okay, they say also the imotenu, it really doesn't matter. Okay, may it be, our God, may it be at the wheel. המשיב בנים לגבולם שתעלנו בשמחה לארצנו ותיטענו בגבולנו. Okay, that's the same, pretty much. תעלנו בשמחה לארצנו ותיטענו בגבולנו. So bring us back to the land of Israel. That is pretty much the same thing. Here's the big deal. ששם עשו אבותינו לפניך את קורבנותיהם, תמידים כי סדרם ומוספים גלחתם. What's the difference? In the past tense. I'm not asking for the future. I'm not asking to do that, but I'm I'm stating a historic fact. Bring me back to that land of Israel. Yes, absolutely. I want that, says the conservative Siddur. To the place where my forefathers used to bring that korban for you. That is accurate. It's absolutely accurate. But it doesn't obligate me in any sense, in any way. It doesn't obligate me. My forefathers also did other things. Had a different. I'm sorry. That's a whole huge discussion by itself. I get it. I have no problem with that. It's accurate, but who cares? If I'm davening to God, am I in that place where I'm asking God for something? Then it has to be personal. It has to be something that relates to me. In fact, okay. So here's what they wanted to do. They don't want to do that because they're not, it goes against their philosophy. We don't want to go back to sacrificial offering, period. However, we want to maintain the traditional tefillah. So this is a tiny change in terms of the language, but it has a huge meaning. So they maintain the traditional tefillah. It's pretty much the same sentence, changing the tense of the verb, but it has a totally different meaning. So this is how they reconcile that. It's not as radical as a reform, but that fits with their philosophy. And keep going back to the art scroll. The next pasuk. בעת מוסף יום השבת הזה, and the Musaf, yeah, of this Shabbat day.
We will perform an offer to love according to the commandment of your will, as you have written for us in your Torah.
Through Moses. Okay. So again, what is it? Future tense. Think about it, right? And the Musaf of this Shabbat day, we will perform and offer to you with love. We will do that. That's what I want. That's what I'm yearning for. That's what I'm davening for. Correct? Here, and this one. ואת מוסף יום השבת הזה. Where's the English? Something like that, yeah. ואת מוסף יום השבת הזה, and this I can't find the English, and this Shabbat day Musaf, עשו והקריבו לפניך. That Musaf offering was brought and sacrificed before you. Again, it's the same method, switching the tense. What? It's not about us anymore. It's about our forefathers. Yeah, they did that a long time ago, but it doesn't relate to me.
And then why did they include it on?
Because they wanted to maintain the traditional tefillah, but to fit with their philosophy. It's a very clever solution, very clever. But theologically, there's a huge difference here. There's a huge difference because it depends. So what are you davening for? What are you asking for? Right? No, I'm saying that there's a major difference between these two sidurim on what are you asking for, what you're davening for. Just to go back to Israel. And that's it.
Are they saying we don't want to worship you anymore?
No, God forbid. God forbid. No. Not that form of worship. Not that form of worship.
Right.
Okay, now that we covered that, let's deal with Musaf that we have it. So let's, as we did with in other sessions, first of all, talk about the structure of that Amidah. I know you heard me say it a million times. The structure of the Amidah, even though it's the Musaf, it's exactly like the other Amidot of Shabbat. We have the first three brachot, they never change. We discussed them a million times. The last three brachot, they never change. We discussed them 2 weeks ago in depth. The middle bracha, holiness of Kedushat Hayom, sanctity or holiness of the day. As we said, it changes throughout Shabbat. The Friday night is different than the Shacharit one. The Shacharit is different than the Musaf, and the Musaf is different than the Mincha one. So you have 4 middle brachot in the Amidah because you have 4 Amidot on Shabbat. And they change. Again, they all have the same theme of Shabbat, but these are different aspects of Shabbat. And if you remember, we quoted the Abu Draham more than once that says that the nature of Shabbat changes throughout that 24, 25-hour period. And therefore, the Kedushat Hayom that talks about Shabbat has to match that change or has to match that whatever stage of Shabbat. And the comparison that he gives is, if you remember, to the wedding ceremony. So the beginning is the Kiddushin, right? Chuppah. Then, and therefore the first Amidah starts with Ata Kidashta. Kidashta, we talked about this idea of separation. We talked about this idea of Kiddushin. It's the same Shoresh. It's this idea of Kiddushin, which is basically what we do under the Chuppah. And then the Shacharit one starts with Yismach Moshe. It talks about the Simcha. Simcha, parallel in the wedding ceremony to the dancing, the Simcha dancing that takes place after the Chuppah. Which brings us to Musaf. Musaf, what happens? What is Musaf? What? It's the offering. What's the offering? Thank you. What is it? It's food. It's food. It's barbecue. Right? So that is parallel. This is parallel to the meal at the wedding. Correct. In every wedding, you have a Sudat Mitzvah.
But you can't have a wedding on Shabbat.
Correct. But what he's saying is it's the correct. It's the process. He said that the day of Shabbat is like the wedding. It's like the day of Shabbat. It's like the wedding, and just like you have different stages of the evening or the afternoon, whatever the wedding is taking place, so is the day of Shabbat. The chuppah time at the wedding is not like the dancing. The dancing is not like the meal. Okay, and that's what he says. It's the same idea. Is also on Shabbat itself, the day. Friday night is not the same nature as Shabbat morning. Shabbat morning is not the same nature as Shabbat afternoon. And that reflects in the tefillah. Okay, so if this is the Sudat Mitzvah, if this is the meal of the wedding, what happens at Mincha? No, how starts Mincha? We spoke about that. How does it start? No, the Amidah, Kedushat Hayom, the middle bracha. Come on, we just spoke about that like last week, 2 weeks ago. Sorry, 2 weeks ago we spoke about Mincha. Ata Echad. What is Echad? 1. It's the Yichud. It's finally when the guests are leaving and the bride and the groom go home. That's the Yichud. They become one. Thank you, Maxine. Yeah, we didn't. So, yes. That's the final stage of the marriage. The marriage ceremony, not the marriage. God willing, the marriage is going to be for many, many, many years. The marriage ceremony. Okay? Okay, fine. So we understand the structure now. Good. Let's go into that bracha that we just that we read. So one thing. Oh, before getting into that, look at the bottom of the page, 466. We're going to discuss that maybe next week. There's another version, exactly, for Rosh Chodesh, Ata Yatzarta. Why do we have a whole different version for that bracha when it's Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh together, when they coincide? Why? Thank you. Because there's another korban specific for Rosh Chodesh, and so the bracha, the blessing, has to reflect on that, and it brings different themes. Rosh Chodesh has a different theme than Shabbat, so it has to be somehow reflected in terms of the theme and the fact that there's another korban, and therefore there's a parallel bracha, a parallel blessing that we recite when Shabbat coincides with Rosh Chodesh. And you can already imagine that bracha is going to include the themes of Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat. And the verses that from the Torah to talk about the Musaf offering, both of Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. Okay, good. Now, let's go to Tikanta Shabbat. So, Tikanta Shabbat, if you remember, when we spoke about that bracha, that middle bracha of the Amidah, when it comes to Arvit, Shacharit, and Mincha, we said that there is some sort of an opening, right? There's an opening. Then there's the quote of the psukim, the relevant psukim. And then there's the closing statement. רצה במנוחתנו, אלוהינו ולאבותינו, רצה במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ודרכנו בתורתך. So that closing statement is going to be the same thing. The verses, we know they're going to be different because these are the verses from the Torah that talk about that korban. Remember, at Mincha, we talked about this idea that there are no verses at Mincha. Why? Because if you remember, we said, no, the themes, shorter, yeah. Friday night, we said the theme was creation, Shabbat of creation. This is why the psukim are Vaychulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzva'am. These are the verses that talk about Shabbat from the story of creation. Then we have revelation. That's in Shacharit, revelation, right? And therefore, no, Sinai. Thank you, Sinai. Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko u'shnei luchot avanim horid beyado. Right? There's a description of Matan Torah in Sinai, right? And then that relates to Shabbat with all the laws of Shabbat. And therefore, the psukim quoted over there are what? V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. It's the laws of Shabbat. That's the Shabbat of Sinai. That's the revelation. Which brings us to Mincha. Mincha is redemption. Redemption is, if creation is the past, creation was the past, revelation is the present, because the laws of Sinai is what we do. That's relevant to us. This is how we live our Shabbat. This is how we experience our Shabbat. Then it's the future. Mincha is the future, that's redemption. That's the idea of Echad, where it comes from, the pasuk that we all know from the book of Zechariah. Thank you. That's Echad. That's future. So if the redemption is going to be in the future, we don't know anything about it. We don't have any verses to quote because it didn't happen yet. Thank you. That's exactly it. You're absolutely right. Good. Now let's go into the text itself. So the middle is going to be the blessings. The closing statement we already discussed. We spoke about that in the context of the Mariv service and Shacharit service and the Mincha service. So it's the beginning that changes. Here, it's a poem. The opening is a poem. How do I know it's a poem? Excellent. Shelley is getting another lollipop. So it's a poetic form of writing. Okay, so if you look at the text, you'll see it's the Aleph Bet backwards, which is right. When one day at some point we'll get to the high holiday liturgy, God help us. We'll get there one day, and over there you will see that there's enormous amount of material that we say during the high holidays. These are poems. And some of them are going to be Aleph Bet structure. Some are going to be Taf, Shin, Reish, Kuf, right? It's going to Z, Y, X, right? Backwards, right? Or Aleph, Bet, Bet, or Aleph, Taf, Bet, Shin. There's all sorts of like, okay, that's the style of writing in that time. Okay, this is, by the way, not unique to Hebrew. By the way, the poetry was written in Arabic, also written in the same way. That was the style of writing. So here we have this poem. By the way, if you remember, this is not the first poem that we see. There are a bunch of other poems that we've seen. Yes, I'm not talking about biblical. I'm not biblical. In the Tefillah, we had it in the Shacharit, in the Yotzer Eladon. That's a poem, Eladon al Kol HaMaasim. Right, so each line, I know for most of you it's too early in the. I know. I said exactly. somebody came to shul one day. I will never forget it. It was a joke, but it was. He says to me, and from some reason they came early. I don't know, maybe they had a yortzeit or whatever. It was so. He says to me, "Oh, so this is how the Torah ends up on the shulchan. I never knew how it gets from there to there. I was never there that early." They always gave like, I know, but it was a nice joke. Anyway, there's a lot of poetry. I'm saying not biblical. Thank you. So Eladon, in the beginning, in the Yotzer, in Shacharit, we usually hit that place at about 9:20, 9:17. So I know it's, yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Yes, but I'm sorry. But if you happen to be here in that time, at about 9:17, I sing it. Michael is there always. He knows. So that's also Aleph Bet. Right? Each line starts, so it's Aleph, El Adon Kol HaMaasim, Baruch U'Mvorach B'Fi Kol Neshama, Godlo V'Tuvo Malei Olam, Dat U'Tvuna. So it's Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet. When we talked about the Lechadodi, that's acronym of the poet's name, Shlomo Halevi, Shlomo Halevi Elkabetz. They're all poems, okay? And therefore they're written in a poetic way. Okay. What? Okay. Shoshana, yes. But you need to unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
That's the only word for Hebrew for poem is piyut.
Correct. Yes, it's a piyut. It's a poem. Yeah.
There's no other word.
You can say shir.
Shir is something you sing.
And
maybe that word was sung also.
No, shir could work. Shir, piyut. Piyut is a specific type of a shir. Piyut is liturgical. Piyut was usually, not 100%, but usually somehow associated with liturgical material. It was something that was used for during the tefillah or for an event, a religious event, like a brit milah, wedding, you know.
We used it that way.
No. It was written for those purposes. Piyutim were written.
והגית בם יומם ולילה. So everything we do is with the idea of God.
Okay.
No, I just think there is no word. A shir is a lashir.
Shir is song, which
It's
is
modern Hebrew.
which is
It's modern Hebrew, but if you
no. The root shir,
shir Lashem.
correct, is in the Bible. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael et hashira hazot l'Hashem. Okay, it's biblical. Okay, let's take a look at that. Tikant Shabbat ratzit korbanotei. You've established the Shabbat. Ratzita korbanotei. It's already from the very beginning. We're dealing with what? Found favor in its offerings. It's immediately. So what is this tikkun? What is this the format of Shabbat that we're talking about in the Musaf service? We're talking about the laws of the Korban Musaf. Tzivita perushea, misidore nesachea. Okay, there were like interpretations that has to do with what? With the nesachim. What is a nesachim? Libations and stuff that is associated with the Korban anyway. Right? Le'olam kavod inchalu, that great, right? Along with her, I don't know what kind of instructed regarding its commentaries along with the order of it showbread. I'm not so sure exactly what it means. I guess, yes, it's all connected to the Korban itself. Let's put it this way. I don't think they have like the greatest translation here. Anyway. מענגע לעולם כבוד הונחלו, תואמי החיים זכו וגם אוהבים תורה הגדולה בחרו. מענגע. מענגע comes from the word oneg. What's oneg? Pleasure, delight. Okay, so those who find delight in it, kavod inchalu. They'll inherit kavod, honor. What does it mean? Who cares? I thought that what we care is whether you keep Shabbat, not whether you find it as a delightful. Right? Wrong. One of the ways in which you keep Shabbat is when you make it into a special day. And the rabbis, obviously that's not the Torah, but the rabbis talk about that. You put on your nice clothes, you have a nice meal. All that kind of stuff that we think, okay, I'm not breaking Shabbat if I'm going to eat a sandwich. Correct. You're not going to break Shabbat if you're eating a sandwich. However, there is an obligation to make Shabbat into a special day. Okay? I always ask my students in the academy, I said, like in the beginning of the semester I said, what if, okay, so I know that Shabbat is going to be 25 hours now. I'm going to go into bed. 25 hours. I'm not going to leave my bed. Am I keeping Shabbat?
Really? Not really.
I'm not violating Shabbat, but I'm not observing Shabbat. So there's the aseh and the lo ta'aseh. There's the positive and there's the negative. We have a tremendous, by the way, in 2024 at least, whatever, 25, we're almost 2025. Emphasis on the don't turn on TV, don't do this, don't, especially with the kids. Don't. Question is, what yes? What is it that we are doing on Shabbat? And I'm digressing a little bit, but I do think that if we highlighted what yes a little bit more, it would have been better. Definitely from dealing with our kids. Think about it. It's not only the don't. It's also what yes.
How not to violate, as opposed to giving you so many halachot.
Correct. Because from purely halachic perspective, sheve al ta'aseh adif. Meaning, if you have an option of do the things or don't do the things, it's better not to do the things, don't violate anything, right? So from halakhic perspective, that's what the rabbis do. From pedagogical perspective, we're in a bad place. We're in a bad place, and this is why you have like so many young people and kids or whatever it is. Okay, so what can I do? Like, it's what can I do? Oh, so I can't technically do this, so I'll do, the whole concept of Shabbat doesn't exist anymore. It's like, doesn't exist anymore. And it's something that we have to think about, and we, if we want our kids. And to your question, and this is something that I grapple with, and specifically in Shabbat, no one teaches the foundations of Shabbat. When the kids in school, later on in high school, it's even worse. They go right into the technicality, the don'ts. Okay, so there are like 39 Avot Melacha, and it's like that was used to build the Beit HaMikdash, and it's like, who cares? Who cares? What do you want from me? It's like if there was like, what? Where is the fundamental philosophical, theological basis for the whole thing that is called Shabbat? When I had the first conversation with my daughter a couple of years ago, and I said, because she was frustrated. Oh, I can do this, and you didn't. And I said, okay, let's talk about it for a second. It took about 30 seconds, and then I said, I can't talk with you. I can't deal with you. And it's like, she stormed out. She's a teenager. Okay, so give me some break. I said, without getting into the specifics, the concept, why is it that we can't do whatever that is, ABC on Shabbat? Have you ever thought about it? What's the pedagogy to make the day different? The day is different. I don't go to work. I go to shul. I wear my good suit and not my jeans. It is different. Okay, so what? I prepare on Sunday for Monday as well. Yes. Stop creating. So what? How that's okay, so what? So it's good for him. What is it what's the connection to me? Yeah.
First of all, we're commanded to
Fine, I'm commanded, but in what way? Like, what is the psychological element here? What does it do to me? To reflect. Okay, now you're getting somewhere. Okay, rest. I can be in my bed and watch a Netflix movie. It'll be great. It's very relaxing. They didn't have that. Okay.
You're squeezing the soul out of the day.
I get it. I understand. I get it. But I'm saying, what is before that? Before the don'ts? What am I supposed to learn from that?
Did I do good things? Bad things? You're supposed to get closer.
Okay. But that's if I pause and reflect and get closer to God. I get it. And how you get closer to God by imitating his ways. I get it. Fine. But what about me have you thought about it? Look, okay, here's the way. Yeah.
Classical reform.
Yeah.
And for whatever reasons, which I don't even fully understand, I rejected it and I ended up.
Okay.
Okay. Observing Shabbat in the non-reform way and in what we would call the Orthodox way.
Yeah.
When you do it, you have to do it to understand. When we said at the Mount, in Mount Sinai.
I get it.
Understand, and it is kind of individual for each person at any given time, but it's a different
But
stage.
you're already at step 10. I'm already at step 1 or maybe step 3. Step No, 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 no. No, okay. It's the okay, here let me suggest something, and maybe that's if I forgot to I don't know, do something before Shabbat. I didn't cook before Shabbat. Okay. I don't have food. Thank you. I don't have food. Okay. I didn't turn on my urn, so I'm gonna have hot water for my coffee. I didn't, whatever that is. Okay. I don't have it. The fact, yes, you go find Shabbos Goy or you go to your neighbor. Okay. But let's talk pedagogically for a second. I get it. Fine. But I'm saying before that, yes, I get it. But why? What is psychologically, pedagogically, what it does to me?
Makes you
No.
think
Okay, makes me think ahead, but whatever. It didn't happen. So you know what? I'm saying,
that-
can I do that? No, it's Shabbat. I can't break it. At that point, what happens? You know what happens? And it's not mine, it's the rabbis talk about that. You realize you're limited. I'm limited. I'm limited. And that's the fundamental idea here. Because what happens during the week? I'm running, I'm creating, I'm doing, I'm this, I'm that, I'm successful, I'm blah, 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 blah. If I don't stop that once in a while, realize that I'm limited, I start to think that I'm God. Not in the simple way of the word, but like I'm unbeatable. Me. Look at me. I'm so successful. I make a lot of money. I'm running. I create. Come Shabbat, and I don't have coffee, and I get frustrated, or whatever that is, and it doesn't matter. You still, if you didn't prepare food, you're gonna be hungry. And that teaches me that I'm limited. Puts me in place, put things in perspective. Why am I saying that? Because for me, this is like the fundamentals. This is the basic of the basic. This is where we have to start with the kids. You want them to buy into the 39 malachot. You want to start telling them about squeezing a lemon on Shabbat. You start with this first. So they'll know what you're talking about and why this is even relevant to them. I can talk to high school kids and they will get it. They're smart kids, so they'll get also the lemon thing and like the whole technicality around that. But you know what? There's no basis there. It's not going to hold. When I lived in New York, when I came from Israel and I lived in New York, went to college, and living in New York was very, very expensive. The scholarship I got was for school. I didn't get too much scholarship to live in New York. So what I did is I taught kids from Ramaz. It's a high school in Manhattan, and I taught them Judaic studies, Hebrew, whatever. I did pretty good money. Private lessons.
Yeah.
And sometimes I was sitting with kids, super smart kids, like really super smart kids, and would prepare them for a Talmud test or whatever that is. And they can this and the Rashi and the Tosfot and the sophisticated and and then sometimes I would ask like something so basic. I don't even remember what, but like basic. Is this in the test? No, it's not on the test, but it's like, how can you discuss here if you don't have this? That's the problem that we have. And I think this is one of the biggest problem that we have with Shabbat specifically. By the way, tefillah, forget it. It's the same idea. Before talking to the kids about specific parts of tefillah, before talking to them about this idea of the halachot of tefillah, stand here, sit here, cover your eyes, shackle, whatever, you need to know, what are we doing? When I taught tefillah at Hillel, I started with pre-1, even kindergarten. And I used to go there. And I said, I'm not going to teach. Look, I said, I'm not teaching Modani and that kind of stuff. That's, that's not. But I said, was anyone sick, ever sick, or didn't feel good, or whatever, or something? Oh, yeah, my mommy had a headache. I had the flu, whatever, that kind of stuff, whatever. And I said, okay, and how did you feel? Bad. So it's like, and then I started telling them about Rafaenu. And they start to understand that, oh, my health is also connected to God. God is the one that decides if I'm going to be healthy or not. So what am I doing in tefillah? I'm asking God to be healthy. Okay, that's something that even a kid in kindergarten can relate to. I think that with Shabbat, with everything, we have to go back to those basics. We have to give them those foundations. Otherwise, it's not going to stay. It's not going to stay. Okay. 3 minutes and we're done. Just I want to finish this idea. So, me'angea, that's the delight. Make that day into a delight. Make it a special day. Bring them to shul. They're going to get candy or ice cream when Shelly sponsor it. Make it special day. I know, you still do it. Correct. Right.
Then they would, I was gonna close the kitchen doors and then they would come in and each one had a plate of food.
Correct. And my kids know that, that we make their favorite foods on Shabbat. And even though I can't even sometimes look at that anymore because it's every week the same stuff, but whatever. But they look. My oldest, like she's like, it's exciting. She gets home from school on Friday, and it's that smell of the schnitzel that she likes, and it's like, it's gonna make it special. It's those little things. Anyway, וגם אוהבים דברה גדולה בחרו. Okay, אז מסיני נצטוו עליה. So we have that additional layer. We talked about Sinai. In Sinai, it's נצטוו, ציוויים. ציוויים, laws. Laws of Shabbat. Right? But and in addition to that, you commanded us to bring that korban musaf. And then I go into that prayer that, we read the English. We ask God to bring us to Eretz Israel so we can bring that korbanot in general, and that particular korban of Shabbat, as we're commanded from the Torah by Moshe, as it said, and flip the page, 469. Here we go. That's the pasuk. V'yom Shabbat, on the Sabbath day, 2 male first-year lambs, unblemished, 2/10 of a ephah of fine flour. That's the korban. That's the specification. 469 and top. That's the recipe. That's the recipe how to do a Shabbat Musaf. Okay? And then we have a little poem. Yismechu b'malchutcha. Who is they? Anyone who is Shomer Shabbat. Yismechu b'malchutcha. They shall rejoice in your kingdom, those who observe the Shabbat. V'korei oneg. But it's also, and call it a delight. It's not only enough to observe Shabbat. You have to make it a special day. You need to enjoy it. Unless you're a Cantor or a Rabbi, then you work on Shabbat and you're excused from that. Okay. Now I'm just Am Mekadeshei Shvi'i. It's a nation, the people that sanctifies the seventh day, the Shabbat. It's us. One of the fundamental differences that happened when Christianity separated from Judaism is when they decided to not to sanctify the seventh day, but rather the first day. right? The Sabbath is Sunday.
They've been changed to some differentiate.
Yeah, mainly to differentiate. No. It has to do also with that part of Greek philosophy that we look at the beginning rather at the end. We're not looking forward towards something. That's the Jewish way from a philosophical point of view, but rather we start big. It's like it's an outlook on life. Like you start big, or you plan for it's just philosophical. That's already goes to Greek, Hellenistic, whatever philosophy. So kulam yizboru v'tangu mitovecha. They all, those people, satisfied in delight from your goodness. And the seventh, meaning the seventh day, you found favor in it and sanctify it. Right? So God's by Kadesh Oto, that's the Pasuk says in Bereshit, in the story of creation, God sanctified that by Kadesh Oto. And what do? We do the same thing. We sanctify the day. How do we do that? B'knisato, b'yitziato. In the beginning of the day, how do we do that? Well, we refrain from other things. We separate the day. We talked about the specific rituals that we do that's separating, right? It's Kiddush and Havdalah also, same Shorish. Most coveted of days, you hold it a remembrance of creation. Now, the Torah calls it Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. When the Torah talks about the laws of Shabbat, it talks about Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. Why it's connected to Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit? Because we have the Shabbat of creation. Maaseh Bereshit is creation. And so, we spoke about it several times. There's the Shabbat of creation, there's Shabbat of revelation, the Shabbat of Sinai, Shabbat of creation, Shabbat of Sinai. There are two different aspects, but for us, living after Sinai, it merges together into one Shabbat. And we have to hold those two elements. So the Shabbat of Sinai is also commemorating the Shabbat of creation, and we have to have both elements. So Friday night is a little bit more about creation. Shabbat day is a little bit more about the revelation, about Sinai, about the laws. But it's all together, right? Because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, everybody in between didn't have the laws of Sinai, of Shabbat. But yet Shabbat existed. We called it Kvia v'Kaima. It was Kavua and Kayam. It was set and it was existed and set from the time of creation. What nature it had, a little bit different. But it was, okay? That's that. I guess next week we're going to tackle the Atay Yatzarta, for Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. Thank you.